Hi everybody, happy Tuesday. I'm just making some lunch here and I thought I would come on and show you guys how you can actually eat for fat loss if you are in a fat loss phase. I'm not, in a fat loss phase right now, but if I were in a fat loss phase, how I would actually eat to still feel satisfied and still feel like I'm eating a lot of food. So a lot of people like eating, normal pasta, or let's say you want to have lentil pasta as an alternative. So what typically people do is they'll just basically have lentil pasta. Let's say you want to have this as a lunch. The problem with this though, if you're in a fat loss phase, is this really doesn't look like a lot of food, even though lentil pasta is higher caloric density because it has protein and it also has carbs, because let's say like if this is lentils or chickpeas, they're still high in both carbs and protein, but the problem is the calories are quite dense. And so if you're trying to stay within a macro profile and hit your macros in a fat loss phase, this might visually not look like a lot of food, and it's also not going to fill you up as much. So what you can do instead, what I've done here, is basically having a smaller amount of lentil pasta, but then adding in some ground beef. So this is lean ground beef. You can also use like any sort of lean protein. It doesn't have to necessarily be lean, but understanding that there's going to be a higher fat content to that. And then what I'm also doing, and there's also Parmesan cheese because we love Parmesan cheese on top. And what I'm also doing is I'm actually just boiling some broccoli florets on the side. These are super easy because they're already cut up in a bag at Costco. You don't even have to cut them. And I'm going to add these to my pasta. So now I have a smaller portion of lentil pasta, but I have ground beef or whatever kind of protein you want with some Parmesan cheese, and I'm going to add the broccoli inside. So with that all together, it's going to look like a lot more food. You're going to get more fiber. You're going to have more volume. It's going to satisfy you, and it's still a balanced meal where you're getting your protein, fat, carbs, and fiber involved. So you can see now the difference between this and the difference between this. They're very similar in the caloric content. I haven't actually fully measured everything, but I just know from experience that with everything that I've added in here, this maybe about 50 calories more, but I'm getting so much more food visually than if I was just having the lentil pasta on its own, or the lentil pasta with butter and Parmesan cheese. This is not going to fill me up as much. So this is just to show you guys that, when you actually add and think about having a balanced meal and having some substitutions, you can still eat in a fat loss phase and still feel like you're eating a lot of food and it's still staying within your macro profile. Another really good example of this is avocado toast. So I know I love avocado toast. I love eggs on avocado. But if you're going to go and have 1 or 2 eggs on toast with some avocado, that's not going to visually look like a lot of food. It might not even fill you up. Even though you're getting your carbs, your fat, and your protein, you're also only getting 12 grams of protein from the eggs. So what you can do instead is having, let's say, an egg with some egg whites, with some veggies and some avocado and homemade potatoes on the side. So that's actually going to look visually like a lot more food. Keep in mind, you really should be making sure you're measuring things and understanding, what the macro profiles of these things are. But we really want to be thinking about not just how can I eat less, despite what Skinny Talk says, which always bothers me. One of the quotes they say is eat less, or eat big, be big, eat small, be small. Like, no, if we can just cancel Skinny Talk altogether, please. But that's just so not true, because you can eat a lot and you can eat a lot of whole nutrient dense foods and still feel like you're fully satisfied. And so if you're listening to this and you're kind of struggling and you're is it okay to have non-breakfast foods as breakfast? Yeah, 100%. Like, you don't have to follow any rules in terms of, breakfast doesn't have to be, eggs and toast. Like, you could have literally steak if you wanted for breakfast and some potatoes and veggies. But it really comes down to, if you're in a fat loss phase, understand how many macronutrients and how many calories you typically need to be in your deficit. And the next step is, don't just try to eat less or eat small. You really want to learn how to actually sort of manipulate, I'll use that word, your, intake in order to still feel full and satisfied. You don't have to go and look at your plate and go, this doesn't look like a lot of food, so I'm doing well, because that actually is going to bite you in the bum. Okay, so Kimmy, if you have any other specific questions on like what you can eat, or what you want to eat, let me know. I also have a free macro calculator as well as many other things in my new free guide. It's called the High Performers Guide to Sustainable Fat Loss and Food Freedom. So if you, Kimmy, want to know what to eat and how much you should be eating, you can actually just DM me that the word guide, and I'll send it over to you so you can calculate how much you want to eat, and then you can go and figure out, okay, if I want to have steak and potatoes at breakfast and not have breakfast food, what do my macronutrients need to be? And then you can go think about filling your plate up. Another final thing I'm going to say is a lot of the times we see, people talking about, you have a quarter plate of veggies, a quarter plate of protein, half a plate of carbohydrates. And that's a great visual. However, there's so many different variations that can go into that are going to be confusing. Like, what if you have a bigger plate? What if you have a smaller plate? And just understanding that, yes, well, that's a starting point. You really want to go and make sure you understand how much you actually need, because just visually looking at things when you're not fully aware of the caloric intake and the macronutrient content of foods might not be very helpful. So I am going to go eat this meal, the one that looks way more food and more satisfying than this meal, because I've added my veggies and I added lean protein on top of my lentil pasta and taken away some lentil pasta from this so that I can still feel very full and satisfied, similar caloric intake, but this is going to keep me full longer. So I'm going to go eat this. I hope you have a great Tuesday. Kimmy, if you want to message me the word guide, go ahead and I can help you out, and I'll see you guys in the next one.